Thanks very much, and thanks Obrat for organising all this. It finally came about. I just want to make about 6 brief points about the topic that was set. In other words, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Balkans, and Brussels, 3 Bs. I think we, in other words, we in the United States and Washington, must better understand the goals, the aspirations, and the capabilities of the Serbian entity, as well as the capabilities, expectations, aspirations, and so forth of the Serbian population in Bosnia, both in the Republika Srpska, but also in the Federation. Fourth, for the RS to play a constructive role in both in Bosnia and the broader Balkan region, it needs investment, and I think I hope that's the main reason that this office has been set up, to attract investment. I'm going to say a few words about my favorite country in a minute. Particularly, it needs to fuel economic development, especially, I would say, Western investment, both European and American. You're not going to attract huge businesses, but there's a whole slew of small and medium-sized businesses. I'm not sure what the Bosnian embassy does in this respect, but I know the ambassador of Kosovo is running around America trying to get small businesses to invest in the country, which I think is a very smart idea, rather than going for the big guys. And remember, it's a small market. You're not going to get that much interest from, U.S. Steel or other big corporations. Anyway, the point I want to make is it's very important because, and again, I'd like to hear from representatives from Banja Luka. I have great suspicions about Russian investments in energy contracts anywhere in the region. And I think Montenegro has been burnt quite severely with the aluminium plant that was sold to a Russian oligarch, Deripaska. I would be very careful with Russian investment. Of course, if it's an equal business relationship, fine. But I'd be careful of being drawn into what I think Russia's trying to create in the region, which is some sort of sphere of influence or sphere of uncertainty, sphere of insecurity, a sphere that won't be integrated in the EU or in NATO. I think the entire region belongs in both organizations. But the RS for its part needs to specify what specifically it wants, what economic sectors are open for business, how long this will take, what are the bureaucratic procedures, can this be done without Sarajevo, with Sarajevo, how does, I think a lot of businesses don't exactly know what the RS is and what it's capable of doing legislatively in terms of investment and so forth. So I think that's very important for any Western investor. Fifth, I would say a couple more points. The RS can be a pertinent example for Balkan flexibility, I would say, whereby semi-autonomous regions are able to establish international offices, pursue international business contacts, and help to develop the country of which they are part. I think there are many such distinct regions in Europe. Europe consists not only of states, but of regions. Many have established offices in Brussels, including from our region, Vojvodina, I believe Dalmatia, and Istria, I think, have all established offices in Brussels, which I think is smart, because, all politics may be local, but all business is also local. Paradoxically, I would say, such outlets may prevent separatist sentiments from rising in the Republika Srpska and elsewhere, because they provide an outlet which is then seen as being beneficial to the development of the people in that particular entity. After all, I would say most of the EU states have distinct regions with international connections that do not challenge state integrity or regional security. This is, part of the European project, which I think gives it an extra sort of democratic boost, I suppose. And additionally, of course, with Washington establishing an office in Banja Luka, you're now reciprocating in Washington. I'm not sure exactly what our officials think about this, but I think they'll probably be watching and monitoring. Let's leave it at that. And sixth, and not last, and I said I'd come back to the EU, I have no illusions about the European Union. I would say its soft power capabilities have weakened over recent years, even despite the fact that they brought in Croatia and so forth. A number of reasons, economic distress, anti-immigrant feeling, opposition to further enlargement, I suppose enlargement exhaustion, which then breeds reform fatigue in some of these countries that want to enter. I think there's a lot of, let's say, disappointment with the performance of Romania and Bulgaria after they brought them in. Also disappointment with older members, if you think about it. Greece, Portugal, Spain, even Italy. So there is a lot of Euroscepticism within the EU, and instructively, the May elections to European Parliament, it looks like a quarter of the delegates will be Eurosceptics of different stripes. Whether the nationalists can form an international, quorum or group within Parliament remains to be seen. I suppose if you're neighbours you won't, but if you're a neighbour of a neighbour you can cooperate much better. In any case, the EU, I have actually no illusions. Nevertheless, there could be, I think, at least it's a destination that promises something. I think without that EU promise, things get worse. You get this vicious spiral of why should we reform when they don't want us? The EU gets fed up and adds extra conditions when there seems to be some backsliding, as in some countries now we're witnessing. Macedonia is a good example. So this vicious spiral of lack of reform, lack of attraction into the EU, and resistance within the EU to bring these countries in, I think makes things worse. It's like Churchill said about democracy. It's a terrible system, but there's nothing better. It's the same with the EU. It's terrible organisation in terms of decision making, as Newland pointed out, but there is nothing better in Europe at the moment, and I think it is a viable destination for everybody. And it's better to belong to the club that everybody belongs to than to be an outsider.
At my ministry, the Economic Relations and Regional Cooperation directly is concerned with economic and foreign investment trends in the RS, in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the entire region, of course, even wider European region beyond that. We have had trade delegations from Baku, Azerbaijan, from Beijing, from other places in the world as well. And we value this sort of roundtables because we all think that your ideas and suggestions might be vital to how we move on. And you're obviously all interested in our region. You wouldn't be on a Friday morning sitting here with us today. And that's why I'm as well here from overseas. I'll be happy to try and respond to any of your questions that you may have with regard to Banja Luka, Republic of Srpska, economic positions, not only economic, but all other that you may have. How I would like to set out the main things today we would like to talk about is a regional perspective in the analysis of the economic and investment outlook, then about the EU process that has been already tackled a little bit, and then the liberalization of the economic and investment environment in Republic of Srpska and Bosnia and Herzegovina. As per the regional perspective, I have to say that significant support for economic development and encouragement of foreign investment has been provided by the very commercial representative offices that we've mentioned before. And yes, I had another addition to, you've been mentioning the offices that are set in Brussels. There's also one other interesting, and it's Canton Sarajevo, who also has a representation in Brussels, whom we cooperate very well with. We have a friendly and fine relationship, and it's very helpful to many of our contacts there. And we are also together, along with Tuzla and several other cantons, parts and members of the Assembly of European Regions. Right. That is another fine organization that also deals with the regions as new centers of power, not of course the political, but exactly the economic power that we would all like to go to and to achieve. As for the position of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Republic of Srpska in the region, it's a very strategic economic position because we're located between the east and west and the north and south. We're 500 kilometers south from Vienna, 680 from Munich. We've established the Banja Luka-Belgrade airline and air traffic recently. Zagreb airport is 2 hours away from Banja Luka. And with this new accession, Croatian accession, where Banja Luka, as the administrative center of Republic of Srpska, is now 48 kilometers away from the EU border, which is a fine position to have. Given also the access to emerging markets that investors get with contacts with Bosnia and Herzegovina, for example, the CEFTA countries with their markets. It's about 30 million inhabitants. There's another 70 million inhabitants under the free trade agreement between Bosnia and Herzegovina and Turkey. There's a stabilization and association agreement signed, providing us a free export to the EU of almost all goods, and meets the standard, of course, gradually opening our market, B&H market, for EU goods, trying to get ready for this. This is annexed in the protocols that are integral part of the SAA. So we are getting ready quickly, trying to move all things and prepare ourselves properly for what comes in when the EU goods are also on our market. As for the setting up of a business in Republic of Srpska, I have to say that there are many good things about coming to Republic of Srpska to work and to open a business nowadays. And that's for many reasons. We have, for example, operating costs on a technical level that would be very low. The RS currently has the most favorable, for example, electricity price, probably even in the EU, comparing to the EU countries, based on the Eurostat statistics. For Denmark, would charge 0.3 kilowatt hour in euro, of course, euro currency. So 0.3 for kilowatt hour in Denmark. It's 0.292 in Germany. In neighboring Croatia, it is also part of the EU, but a part of the region, it will be 0.137, whereas in the Republic of Srpska, it's 0.044 euro. And it's a thing that we consider very important for most of the businesses that would be open, especially with the industrialization of some parts of the brownfield investment that I'll go back to later. And we've also witnessed the increase of taxes in countries of the region, whereas in Republic of Srpska, we have kept our tax, income tax and profit tax at the level of 10%. The VATs are 17%, and we have a very favorable labor quality cost ratio to also be taken into consideration. I will try to talk a little bit more now about our perspective, the legal and regulatory liberalization with regard to the EU accession process. And although there are many differences between RS and the Federation, we both, as entities, agree that desirability of accession to the EU is there. As you yourself said, that is a part of a membership we'd like to have sooner rather than later, although there's a lot of work to do. But the RS has been taking the lead for a while now with regards to revising the legal and regulatory regimes in line with EU standards and requirements. And we have as well proposed a practical coordination mechanism for joint activities of the RS and the Federation with the EU. So we're not at all seeing ourselves as competing with the Federation. We, of course, are well aware that we only have a stronger economic future jointly if there's cooperation, of course, and we are hoping to actually set a good example that the Federation may copy or adapt as they fit, because we don't have same systems, we have many differences in our systems, so there's no copy-paste, but whatever we can do well, they can, and they're offered to, on our behalf, to take over as a good practice. However, we cannot wait for the Federation to decide to adapt their economic system to EU requirements, and we are trying to move our part of the economy as fast ahead as possible. And it is actually the decentralized structure of the country, the complex constitutional structure of the country, that is out of the Dayton Accords, probably one of the fine things that allows the RS to considerably move forward in the economic field more than anywhere else, because we are trying to pursue a legal and regulatory liberalization for both domestic and foreign investors. And the foreign investors, I don't know if I've mentioned, enjoy the national treatment, and they have, under the latest amendments on law on foreign investment of the Republic of Srpska, there are no restriction for investing in any sector apart from the media. And the latest amendments of the law liberalize the defense industry sector for foreign investment, and profit expatriation is unrestricted. Foreign investors' imports for projects are also exempt from duty and tax payment, and acquisition of real estate is not restricted. And so many steps have been made, and since 2006, the RS has implemented regulatory, legislative, and administrative reforms that include, for example, the first regulatory, we call it guillotine in the region. It was actually targeting all unnecessary and burdening regulations. They were cut out from the system. Then a regulatory impact assessment was introduced into the legal system of Republic of Srpska, and we've established commercial courts. We have adopted law on public and private partnership. There's a reform underway of land registry and related legislation, as well as reform on legislation that governs construction permits. That was the one that was very complex previously. And business startup reform was conducted. That was very efficient. We now have the operational one-stop shop for business registration that started working officially on December 1, 2013, and it was aimed to significant reduction of time that was required for a business registration, and it decreased the time required from 23 to 3 days for registering a business in Republic of Srpska, and the number of procedures required from 11 to 5. And given the one-stop shop, it now gets really easy. Plus the costs of starting a business that used to cost from 5 to 800 euro are now close to less than 100 euro in total. So we have also introduced some amendments to the law on profit tax, and the tax is then reduced by the amount of investment that is made in equipment intended for performance of project production activity. We've reduced tax base for employment where an employer has over 30 workers during one calendar year, and many other incentives. The RS government is also providing larger financial incentives for big investments, for additional employment. But most of these information, I would like you all to write down a website, investsrpska.net, which is very useful with most of these information that are daily tracked and on our behalf also managed from our economic department in this ministry.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Obrad, for organizing this event. Our law firm became involved with the government of the Republic of Srpska in the summer of 2009. And so this, for me at least, we represented many governments over the years, that this was a sort of crash course in Balkan politics, which is an absolutely fascinating field, as all of you know far better than I do. The one thing, though, that seemed to me to be remarkable as I began to meet especially people in the U.S. government was that in so many quarters, journalistic and governmental, the concept, the image of what is going on in the Balkans generally, and VIH in particular, seemed not to be evolving, even though the facts on the ground were changing and were evolving. And so, as a relative newcomer to the field, what I'd like to suggest this morning is that there are a number of elements in the situation, the factual situation on the ground in VIH and the Balkans, that to me cry out for a sort of new paradigm for analysis and a new paradigm for the actions of the international community in this region. Let me take a few minutes to say what these elements are. First of all, I think there should be a very strong focus on reality, on the facts as they exist, and not so much on theory and concern with what a perfect state might look like. If you look around the world, you don't see very many examples of the perfect state. We shouldn't expect to see them here, but I think what you will see if you look closely, and some of the things that Jovina has just said are a perfect illustration of this. There has been an enormous amount of change since the first decade after Dayton, just to take an arbitrary period of time. And I don't think the degree of change has been fully appreciated. First of all, B&H is not under construction. It's not a work in progress. It's a real functioning state. And what we see from the international community, I think, are too many projects for fundamental change of something that is not likely to fundamentally change and doesn't need to fundamentally change. So this isn't a laboratory for political experiment. This is a functioning country that should be approached as other countries in the region and indeed in Europe are approached. It is, of course, and this also should be accepted, as the Chinese sometimes put this situation, there are three constituent peoples sleeping in the same bed, but with different dreams. The concept, the outlook, the desire for future prospects is not the same for each of these three constituent peoples. And one of the very good things about that is that the Constitution, which is actually, as you all know, Annex 4 of the Dayton Peace Accord agreements, provides rather well for a situation where there are different concepts, different visions, different outlooks, but still a desire and a benefit, as Jovina has said, to cooperation. I think we have to accept as the international community that these grand projects for political restructuring from outside and from the top, the April project, the April package, the Butmir process, even the most recent U.S. Embassy idea for redoing the Federation, which resulted in, I can't remember how many, 100 or so specific reform projects. This is not what really is going to be of assistance to BIH or to the Balkans. What is much more likely to work in BIH is the very wide autonomy for each of the entities, for the cantons, for municipalities that is built into the Constitution as written. And so I would suggest that where the international community can be most effective and do the most good at this point in history is to focus on the economy and to focus on the levels of government that is directly in touch with service delivery to citizens in BH. Again, the entities, the cantons, the municipalities. Assistance projects could make them more efficient. But building bigger ministries in Sarajevo and building bigger staffs and the kinds of programs that we so often see, not only in BIH but in a lot of other countries, should not be the first priority. I would say the first priority is encouragement of domestic and foreign investment. How can the international community help here? Certainly anything that will free up commercial and concessional finance for new investment should be an international priority, international community priority. Support and advice for the kinds of legal and regulatory reforms that Jovina has described. The Republic of Srpska is working hard to accomplish. These can benefit from the good example of what other states have done in this regard. Finally, I think we need to be realistic and also optimistic about EU accession. And one reason for this is EU accession is not a moment, it's a process. And that process is well underway. B&H is a part of Europe. And the economies, if you look at the banks, open in Banja Luka, the banking process is part of Europe. The trade and investment is part of Europe. And in this case, Europe certainly includes Russia and Serbia. So the process is underway. The process of reforming laws in the RS to accommodate the acquis is well underway. And whatever may happen at that moment, whenever it occurs, that B&H becomes part of the EU formally. Informally, the process is well underway and needs to be encouraged and supported.
The race to leave SEFTA and join the EU is a mistake. If you look at the trade patterns of the EU, of the Balkans, yes, 2/3 of Balkan trade overall is with the European Union. But only 1.4% of EU trade is with the Balkans. And I honestly do not see that changing very much with accession. Essentially, EU focus is elsewhere. Okay, the second observation. Actually, despite accession and despite what's been going on with Croatia now in Slovenia, the desire of the rest to join, there's actually a certain detachment going on, I think, from the EU because of the nature of the region itself and the evolution of the EU itself. There is a much different new reality. I think the point that Janusz made about the but the skepticism, but the weaknesses, but the problems really gets to the point. The EU is far from what it was just a decade ago, certainly before 2008. Today it is less sure of itself in both expansion and deepening. It is possible that the EU has passed its prime. I think, for example, that it is finally dawning on my friends in Turkey that they are never going to get in. That the concept of adjustments, that the demands placed by the EU on Turkey are as much a means to keep the Turks out as to bring them in.